Happy New Year!
Happy New Year, Sarah.
It's our New Year's Eve episode.
I know. It's like a tradition that started without us really realizing it was tradition, but here we are.
I know. The first year, it was our pegging episode, and we just thought it was just
funny.
It could not be contained.
Right.
And then our second New Year's was Jessica Kane with many, many of our friends. And now it's just the two of us.
Well, it's a simpler time.
I know. We're socially distancing even in podcast land.
Oh, God.
And we're doing Roy Kent Redux.
Well, I guess we should say welcome to Fated Mates, everybody. I'm Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader, Roy Kent lover, editor, whatever. That's what I am.
I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels. I write romance novels, and I really like Roy Kent. I really do. I mean, this season 2, there was a lot more to think about with Roy.
Yes.
I also decided this season that I really like Isaac.
Oh, listen. Yes.
Also, fully would leave my husband for Rebecca. So here we are. It was a big year for me. I was like, oh, I feel feelings for Hannah Waddingham.
Who doesn't, though? It's true. I was thinking about this. You and I and Sophia Benoit talked about Roy Kent and Ted Lasso kind of before Ted Lasso was Ted Lasso. Before
Ted Lasso was cool.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be that way, but you guys, we were riding the Ted Lasso train.
Really, we were ahead of the curve.
We're forerunners.
We were wearing our Doc Martens and our flannel and listening.
Doc Martens are back. It's so weird. I mean, maybe they were never gone, but they are big.
My daughter, my 8-year-old, got a pair of silver Docs with hearts on them for Christmas from her aunt, and I am very jealous.
Nice. Yeah. This little romance has some, and then Mr. Reed's romance bought some. He wears them to work, but I was like, look at you wearing Doc Martens.
Oh, that's pretty badass.
So cute.
Look at that.
So anyway,
we love Ted Lasso before others did.
And it doesn't matter. Ted Lasso
we're
for
not
everyone, but
look, we're not tracking it or anything. I mean, it's not in our calendar or anything.
You know what, though? Here's the other thing that was really interesting for me just generally this time around is, okay, season 1, I watched with Mr. Reed's romance, and we watched it in a day or two, right? We just binged it.
Sure.
But season 2, they released episode by episode. So
that's right, because you didn't watch it. We watched it episode by episode, and then I was like, Jen, you gotta read this.
Wasn't season 1 all at once, though? No. Oh, okay. So I watched it. I binge watched season 1. Season 2, I watched episode by episode. But I found it to be a very different and enjoyable experience to watch it this time around. Pretty much straight through again.
Listen, I felt the exact same way. That's so interesting that you say that. I much preferred it as a binge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know, is that because TV is just teaching us that now to binge?
I don't know. I think in this case, when you're tracking character development, it really is more rewarding to get all of the text at once.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas it was so easy to forget those little pieces over 8 or 10 weeks. So I just think it's a different experience too when you're...
Well, and also... There is, when you watch it on the binge, especially after having watched it week by week, on the second watch, you can sort of appreciate some of the more nuanced characterization stuff that was going on.
Yes.
Over the course of the season with everyone. I'm thinking about Nate and Sam, and suddenly you have these moments where you're like, oh, I see what's happening. This has nothing to do with Roy Kent, but there is a very clear thread of the television show Cheers through the entire season.
Right.
That involves all sorts of little nods to Cheers, including Ted walks into a room. The first time Ted walks into a room during the whole season, everyone goes, Ted, the way they go Norm. And then Sam and Rebecca are, of course, this. And then there is a sort of moment where Ted says, oh, you're my first favorite Sam and Rebecca,
Right.
And then there's a moment where the guy who plays Norm, whose name usually
George
I know,
Wendt.
thank you, there's a signed picture of him on the wall of the halal shop.
Uh-huh. Cheers plays a very important part in a personal pop culture reference that I share with my brother Eric, who was on the podcast last time.
Friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod, Eric, who was on last time we talked about Ted Lasso. And so it's like we are big Cheers watchers in my family, and Eric in particular.
Listen, Cheers is great and holds up.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Holds up.
Yes, absolutely. So there's this one scene where it's with Norm and Cliff, right? And Cliff is talking about some new girlfriend he has or whatever. And everyone is like, what's your mom think about this? And he's like, I don't know. What are you supposed to do when the woman you love most in the world meets the love of your life? and Norm's like, which one's which? Because nobody knows, right? Like, he's such a mama's boy. So at that exact moment, Clifford's mother comes into the bar and says to him, Clifford, you left your shower cap on the floor, and so you're gonna have to wear it all day. And she sticks a shower cap on his head and storms out of the bar, right? And across the bar, Frasier says to Lilith, he says, I'm starting to understand that Cliff is heroically well adjusted. And
that's a great line.
Listen, I have this as a video clip. I will put a link to it. It's illegal, of course. But every time something goes sideways in the family, Eric and I will say, you're heroically well adjusted. It's like this inner mantra, right?
Listen, I love
and after
it.
the holidays.
It's like Colin from Ted Lasso. I'm strong and capable man.
Yes, exactly. It's like you have to have your mantra. And I think that Cheers reference, we
didn't check in about the holidays, but how was it? Tell everybody what Mr. Romance gave you.
You guys, it's happening right now. So I had to change my office around. I was in Little Romance's room, but now he's back from college. It's not going to work.
Feels very, homesteadery.
Right. So I have a new office space downstairs. It's great, but it's really open. It's not in a closed room. And so I was telling Mr. Reed's Romance, I was like, well, the only problem with that is when I'm recording, it needs to be quiet. Yeah. You can't come in and out. There can't be people in the kitchen. So he got me this thing called a busy box, and it's like a light. And you can change the sign. So I put in the one that says recording, and it's upstairs. And then when I'm recording, I can turn it on so no one will come downstairs and bother me.
Listen, this is
so
true
sweet.
Love.
I know.
This is the nicest present I've ever heard of from a
so sweet.
Husband to a wife.
I know.
A person who just understands what's important to you and wants you to live your best life.
It's so sweet.
You want to hang out with your weird friend and talk about your little books? I support you.
Yes. Just tell me so I can avoid it.
Exactly.
It's really cute. So right now the busy box is on. It says recording.
Adorbs.
Totally.
A+ on this as a gift.
I'll put a link in show notes, everybody.
To a partner who
maybe you want one for your kids.
They love.
It's busy.
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
Shut up. Well, can I tell you what my
Yes.
in-laws bought me?
Yes.
This is really sweet. So my in-laws live in a place called Paso Robles, California.
I know where that is.
On the Central Coast. It's wine. It's Central Coast wine country. It's right near. Every time I go there, I make them take me to Hearst Castle. And I will say my in-laws are extremely long-suffering and always take me to Hearst Castle. Even though I think they're very tired of sitting by the pool and staring at the Roman baths. Anyway, Hearst Castle is super cool. You should totally go there. Anyway, but in Paso, there is a used bookstore called Spare Time Books. And it is like a romance novel reader's dream because it is just floor to ceiling used paperbacks of all different genres, but many, 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 many romance novels and old and awesome. And Eric suggested that they were what do we get Sarah? They want to get you a nice gift, a gift that right,
sure,
you'll love. And Eric was like, okay, you guys are going to think this is weird, but you should really go in there And you should see if you can find any like first edition romance novels from the 80s. Yes. And he gave them a list of our trailblazers. And he was like, especially these people. And so they came back. So they sent me a box of individually wrapped paperback used books from Spare Time Used Books in Paso Robles, California. And let me tell you something cool. And we will put this, maybe we can put this like in show notes or something, or maybe it's the image right now for Bantr. I guess we're bantering now.
We're bantering.
Spare Time Used Bookstore has a punch card, which is what I've always thought bookstores should have.
Have a punch card.
Every $10 you spend at this used bookstore, you get a punch, and then when you get 10, you get an extra $10.
Nice.
I know. So anyway, thanks to used bookstores around the country, thanks especially to Spare Time for my collection of redacted author name used books. Because the main person is a trailblazer who we have not run yet.
Okay. Well, okay.
It's pretty great. Also, I have a request, and maybe you'll know this.
Okay.
My sister, who was here for Christmas, we were talking about I put an Iris Johansson, an old original first edition Iris Johansson, into her stocking because she was a very, very big Iris Johansson fan when we were growing up. And she has a question for you, Jennifer, and for our many listeners, which is, back in the day, writing as Stephanie James, Jane N. Krentz wrote a category, which my sister remembers vaguely as this. The heroine is driving like a cherry red convertible down a highway. The hero, and it breaks down, and the hero, who is a long-haul trucker, pulls over to help her, and she is like kind of disdainful of the profession of long-haul truckering, but he like gets her car working, and like they basically have like Krentz-style banter, Stephanie James-style banter.
Right.
She, of course, is headed to her new job as the executive assistant to the head of a long-haul trucking company.
Of course.
Who happened to have to drive the big rig for a little while down the road. So, this is how my sister remembers this book. She fully believes it was a Stephanie James novel. That is your task.
To try and find it. Okay. Faded
Magnificent Firebirds unite.
Assemble. Can I shout out one more amazing thing that happened? A listener of ours reached out to me. Her name's Alice. She lives in Canada, and she was like,
"Hi, Canada."
I found essentially like these Tupperware containers. I packed up full of old romance novels in the 90s. Do you want them?
Alice, why did you reach out to Jen and not me?
Because you're moving, Sarah.
Oh.
Anyway, right? I don't know, because sometimes people
like
Sarah
you
McLean.
More than me.
No, you're just more intimidating. They feel like they
are
can
always much nicer to Jen than me.
You can listen, if you're like, this is kind of really for Sarah, but I'm too intimidated, also let me know. So the first pass is she sent me these photos, and I was like, okay, first pass, send me, because I think it's going to have to happen in stages. Send me the historicals. So it's a bunch of like
Alice out there going through all of these, taking pictures for you.
I know, I'm so excited.
Alice, what can we do? Can we send you a Fated Mates thing? Reach out to Jen.
Right.
Tell us what we can send you.
Here's the part that's really cool. So she was like, all I want is for someone to pay for the shipping. And I was like, of course. And so she told me what it would be. And I was like, well, what's your PayPal? And she was like, just donate it to Flatbush Cats in Brooklyn or to another place in LA. And I chose Flatbush Cats. So it was pretty awesome. So I was like, Alice,
the cat's
too good for this world.
Cats of Brooklyn, thank you.
I know.
You're great. We love you. Wait, so what's in the box, Jen? What's in the box?
Okay, listen.
Bearing the lead here.
Virginia Henley's, Amanda Quick's, Joanna Lindsay's, Julie Garwood's.
Listen, I'm excited.
I know, me too. So
obviously, Alice, you may have sent them to Jen, but they're being shared.
Oh, of course, obviously. And then some that just look like those real old school ones with like the, like the glittery covers and stuff.
Yeah, I'm for it. Those Catherine Coulters.
Yes.
Big gold gilded Catherine Coulter.
Connie Mason.
Oh, yeah.
Constance O'Banion.
Yes.
I mean, these are names I have not heard in a long time, so I'm super excited about it. So
I love it.
I will let everybody know when they arrive.
All right. That's
ready?
enough banter. We've done it now.
I'm like,
talk
we
through the
bantered.
window. It's going to take hours for us to talk through season 2 of Roy Kent because Roy and Keeley have like a nuanced, like a relationship now.
A beautiful arc, I know.
It's great.
And Roy, I think Roy also has, oh God, this show is so good.
I know.
Okay,
I know.
Can I tell you something I did not like on the second watch? And I don't care if this makes me, I just don't want to talk about Rebecca and Sam. He's too young. There, I said it.
Listen, I'm with you. Look, empirically, I understand that these are two very attractive people who like should definitely bang it out. But the moment they said 21, my brain just went McCreeve, full McCreeve brain. I was like,
I really
no more.
thought he was like 26, 27.
Me too. And I was going to be like, get it, girl. And then, oh, no.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
I would just like us to pass over that.
We'll pass right over it. I actually have a whole theory, which I know that you don't care for, but we'll get to it at the end. And it is not about Sam. It is about Ted.
Fair. Okay.
So,
all right.
Where do you want to begin?
It hurt my feeling. Sorry. That's episode 10.
Oh, that's very late. It hurt my feelings.
It hurt my. You know
I marked that too. So last time we did it episode by episode, which I think is the best way to do it.
Okay, fair. Okay.
So because I think it's important, we start. Okay, so this series, this arc, this season or series, I think is what it's called of Ted Lasso, the second season for those of us who are in America. Follows. So Ted Lasso is announced as a 3-episode show, a 3-season show. So at the end of last season, we had like the great disappointment, right?
They were relegated.
Which actually seems extremely cool. And I mean, like, it feels a lot like if American sports were like this, I would care more.
Sure.
To be honest,
which
I think somebody says in Ted Lasso, like it's very cool. So, so anyway, they were relegated. It was very sad. We lost Jamie to Manchester City, and Ted and Rebecca kind of finally understand. Like Rebecca comes clean, and everybody's disappointed. And then Rebecca's like, "I'm not firing you. You're staying. We're gonna start over fresh next year." So we begin the season, and they're like in this endless string of ties.
Yes.
And then, as Eric likes to point out, this show that was all about like kindness and the best in the world begins season 2 with the most baller move of all baller moves.
I mean, there's basically one rule, right?
Yeah. Well. And also, like, it's the best show. It's a show full of joy.
Yes.
And then they take the most joyful character and they have him kill a dog right off the start.
With the power of his hooker kick.
Listen, football is death.
The part where he, like, wakes up in bed with 2 women
Rojas.
And he's like, football is death.
Danny Rojas, I love you. You are the best. I mean, I love so much about this season.
Oh, wait, can I have a small little aside? I know you're not a big Marvel person, but you know Venom because of Tom Hardy.
I do.
At the end of the Spider-Man movie, there's like a little preview of the next Venom movie.
Ooh.
Like a little, and you know who the bartender is, who clearly is going to be involved? The actor who plays Danny Rojas.
It's Danny Rojas.
And I was like,
football is life.
I said to my husband, I was like, oh, it was Danny. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, you know from Ted Lasso? And he was like, oh, that's who that was. So I was like,
wait, so is the preview in the Spider-Man movie for Venom 3?
They have these little like
I know, the little
these
thingies.
teasers or whatever.
Who knows? I've watched Marvel movies before.
Yeah, okay. Who knows? I don't
the
know what
end
it's gonna
credit
be.
scene, but it's separate from Venom 2. It's like the next one.
It's like teasing some future Venom.
Is Tom Hardy in it?
Yeah, so it's Tom Hardy sitting at a bar and Danny is the bartender.
Listen, it's not like Spider-Man needed any more ticket sales on its opening weekend, but like had I known that, it might have gotten another one.
I'd be like, just like sneak in to watch the last 5 minutes.
Let me know in Tom Hardy's and things. Here's what I want to know. Why does it say episode 1 Roy Kent hair clips on my notebook?
Oh, well, because Danny's hair and Jamie's hair, all of their little headbands, they're slicked back.
Yeah, but that's not why it says that. I don't know.
I don't know.
For some, you guys, I don't know. I watched this literally right before the holiday, and then everything went out of my head. But it says quite clearly, the very first note I have is Roy Kent hair clips.
I noticed a lot of interesting hairdos in this season, including
I love it.
When Isaac gives his haircut.
We gotta say,
sorry.
that's like a whole, it is magnificent.
This episode, listen, I hope you started it at 7 p.m. because it's not going to be over until the stroke of midnight.
Eric's like, oh my God, you guys. Okay, so here's where we are. Just to recap, so that's the sort of broad thing. Yeah. We're in a series of ties. The goal of the season is to get them back into the Premier League.
Promoted, that's what it's called.
Promoted to the Premier League. So that's the sort of overarching, like, big picture arc of the series. Is Richmond going to get back into the Premier League? On top of it, we have Roy, who has left soccer because his knee is a bum knee. And so he's trying to figure out what he's doing. And so right now, he's coaching. Episode 1, he's a coach of an 8-year-old girls soccer team. And let me tell you, I mean, like, if that isn't the most, again, if you needed any evidence, that's it. Exhibit A through Z, Roy Kent coaches girls soccer. He's obviously a romance hero. Should we say that this is if you are new to Fated Mates, you should probably go back and listen to Roy Kent. Is Roy Kent a romance hero, which we did last season?
I mean, the answer so obviously yes. Now it's just like, let us clarify and name the ways.
Okay. He's the best. He's the best. He's like standing on the field screaming at these little girls who are just delighted by him.
Oh, yeah, completely. Like, completely. Now, I think the other thing that's sort of amazing about that whole arc, though, too, is that he will have nothing to do with Richmond anymore, right? Like, he won't go to the bar and hang out with them. And Keeley, of course, works for Richmond because she is like the director of PR and marketing, but he will not, have anything to do with it.
So Ted is leaving. Listen, part of what I love about this show, and I mean, I know you don't want to talk about Rebecca and Sam, but one of the things I really don't want to talk about is the beard episode because it enraged.
Oh, I didn't even watch it.
It enraged me.
It doesn't exist. I didn't even watch it.
Just pretend it doesn't exist. Both times.
Oh.
I can't. It enraged me. But the point, so that's all I'll say about that. But what I will say is there is a reason, for those of you out there who are like, I love the beard episode, like my husband, who love the beard episode. I don't understand, Sarah. What are you talking about? Here's what I'm talking about. The writing on this show is so tight and so anti-patriarchy, right? Like, so much. Every time they have a chance to take down toxic masculinity, they do.
They do.
And the beard episode can't exist because of that. I will do a TED Talk later on that sometime. But the point is that, so at the beginning of this, so Roy is teaching girls soccer. And then there is this real sense in this first episode of like, Roy is at sea.
Yeah.
And and Keeley can see it, but she doesn't know how to
fix it.
And to tackle it. And so she keeps kind of like coming at him with like, you should do this, you should do that. Ted wants him to come to a Richmond game because, as we know, in the long game, Ted's long game is like he knows exactly what Roy needs.
Right. In
that way that like Ted often does know what people need. He's a good coach. But so one of the things that Ted is doing is that every game, he leaves Roy a ticket at will call, and it's always under the name of like a female, like a woman singer.
Right.
And it's great. So it's like funny. Dolly Parton and Reba McEntire and...
The other thing, though, that I thought was really interesting is so obviously Roy and Keeley are very happy, but the other place it shows us that he finds solace is with the yoga moms, what I call, right?
This is the episode 1, right? He's
Right.
avoiding Keeley, and he's like, no, I have things. I have stuff to do.
Right. So he's going to go be with these yoga moms. And so, they like watch reality TV show together. But the other big thing that happens in this episode is the double date, right?
I mean which on the rewatch, I was like, I'm so surprised this is the first episode. I thought it was deeper in.
Absolutely felt the same way, because it really sets up so much of what is important about the way Roy is relating to himself and to Keeley and to other people.
Yes.
Right? So Rebecca is dating some handsome but like dumb kind of blowhard guy.
Millionaire.
And she's, and she and Keeley are always together, like sort of like, do you like him? Right? It's
Keeley and Rebecca are in love. They are the love story of the season.
If you worked with your best friend, this is how it would feel. It's like, right? We've all seen it. And so she's sort of like, well, will you guys come on a double date with us just to see what it's like? And Roy just like drinks his way
and
through
he's
the entire thing.
Her boyfriend
right?
is like a huge Roy Kent fan.
Right. So it's kind of awkward and uncomfortable, but Roy is just like going to do this good guy thing, and he just keeps drinking. But then on the way out afterwards, right? Like they're kind of like, it's like, Keeley, what did you think? And, and she's like, oh, I loved him. He was so nice. And then, Roy was like,
fucking hell.
Is there a problem?
Tell the truth. He's fine. That's it. Nothing wrong with that. Most people are fine. It's not about him. It's about why the fuck you think he deserves you. You deserve someone that makes you feel like you've been struck by fucking lightning.
Right? Like, what are you talking about? You're better than him, right? And this is then the famous or infamous line, right?
Don't you dare settle for 5.
And so say we all. Everybody, this is what you deserve. And this is like the moment I wrote down, like, high expectations. Like,
yes,
Roy Kent is a romance novel telling you deserve better. You deserve the best you can get.
Yeah.
And
I think this whole episode is a struggle to then feel like you deserve it for so many characters, right?
Well, the whole season, is about that.
The whole season.
Don't settle.
Don't settle. And don't fuck it up either when you do have it.
Yes.
So it really does set the stage, that first episode. But yeah, like you, I was like, wait, that was episode 1? I don't know why it surprised me as well. I thought it was so much further in, but they really come out of the gate strong with, setting the whole theme for essentially, like I said, the whole series.
Yes.
So you ready to talk about episode 2?
Episode 2 is the best. I love it.
Yeah.
So this is what we'll call the masturbation episode.
I mean, what else could we call it, really?
Right. I mean, okay, but oh my God. It's so hot.
Good.
It's so hot.
So hot.
So we find out that Roy had a bit of an embarrassing time when he officially resigned from soccer, when he retired from soccer. And he cried when he was giving at his press conference, which is again, right? Take the most masculine character and give him nuance, give him, tell everybody that it's totally, not only is it fine for him to have cried at his resignation, his press conference, it's really hot.
Oh.
So he and Keeley are living together now, it seems.
Well, it's interesting because
it's not ever clear.
Well, in the Christmas episode, he says, we're going to go to my posh neighborhood. So he still has his house somewhere, but they're more or less living at her place.
Yeah. And so he gets home and he is looking for her. And she is nowhere to be found. So he seeks her out.
Yeah, sure.
And she's
in bed having some private time.
He surprises her with,
were you having a wank?
and she throws the phone. She's so embarrassed.
And the best part about this is he's like, so like, well, I'm like, I want to know what gets you excited. Like, okay, I can, tell me about what it is you were looking at. And she's like,
no.
deer in the headlights. And it turns out it's him crying at a press conference.
Oh,
and what she says is, right, like, basically, you're being passionate and vulnerable. And that is what turns her crank. And it is.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. And what's so cool about the writing here is this is the same episode. So then she like convinces him, he's like being convinced. This is the episode where she convinces him to try color commentary. Like, so go work for, whatever, the sports network, which is a real sports network. All these people are real. And like do the color commentary on soccer football every, whatever day.
I didn't know they were all real people until my friend Ernesto was a big soccer fan. He was like, I can't believe they got all those people. And I was like, oh, me neither.
Listen, but I bet that if there was an American football show, they get all those people too. Like,
of course.
What a cool thing. And also, it's a total delight. I mean,
it is. Right.
Listen, if Ted Lasso asks you to do anything, you do it.
You do it.
Right?
Sure.
And so there's this moment where he's getting his makeup, like he's getting like touch up. And she says, what do you usually do with your lashes? And he says, I leave them the fuck alone. The moment there's this like push pull of like, you have this like super sensitive character who like can feel his feeling and understands like patriarchy and toxicity and like why nuance is important in all of these conversations and like is so into like having all of these different sides of himself and then also still is like, fuck you, I leave my lashes alone.
What do I do with my eyelashes? I know. It seems to me, at least here in America, like it's such an acceptable like kind of thing to do after you retire from the sport. And so to see Roy reject it, you're kind of like, well, why? Why is that? And then at some point you get that it's just like so painful. He just misses playing so much. Mm-hmm. That it's not that he doesn't want to have this like arc of being a commentator. It's that he just misses it too much. And
it hurts. It's broken. It's grief. Like he's grieving. And what's interesting is this whole season is a lot about grief. It's about grief in many, 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 many different ways, like what loss looks like and what like the way that we put ourselves back together after losing somebody, after being disappointed in somebody, after being disappointed in ourselves, after like not being able to live up to expectations. Like there's so much grief happening.
And I think I kept thinking at this moment, too, about when we had my brother Eric on for season 1. He said that one of the things he thought about a lot with Ted Lasso is that it's like a workplace comedy, right? And I think one of the things that's like really interesting in our modern world is even though I like hate capitalism, I like my work. And so it's like this really interesting push-pull to see Roy like essentially grieving for like, I'm still in the workplace, but not in the way I want to be, right? I'm not in the role I was anymore. Right. I'm too far removed. And how little room there is in our society for that. Like I am defined a lot by the work I do. And it's complicated because I shouldn't be, but here I am. And I thought that captured that so well.
Well, because in the first episode, in episode 1, there's this moment of like with Rebecca's boyfriend, where he's like, oh, it must be so hard for you. Like he really hits that hard. And there is that moment like, and for anybody who's ever, left a career or, lost a person or left a relationship, right? Like I think Roy's relationship with soccer is a lot like most people's relationships with like, people. And I think whenever that happens, when you make that sort of big life choice, when people kind of hammer it home for you, it often feels like, oh, well, should it feel worse? Like, does it?
Right.
There's so much complexity in the way Roy is dealing with this.
Yeah.
And the irony is, of course, the whole time, Ted is in the background saying to Keeley, hey, is Roy coming to the game? Is Roy coming? Like, Ted knows what Roy needs. And what's interesting is that, and this episode is not, this Fated Mates episode is not about Ted and Dr. Sharon and like all of that's going on, but Ted is finely tuned and like hyper aware of what everyone else needs, mostly, that like he can't see it and he can't figure out what he needs himself.
Yes. So, I mean, I think that there's like a real furthering of that. Who are we when we're at work? Especially if we're at the top of our game at our workplace, versus how can you be so competent at work and such a wreck personally, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways in which that played out in really interesting ways. But, you know, at the end of that episode, one of the things he says to Keeley is, what if they think I'm shit? And so it's like, you know, to be at the, you know, the top of the game, literally, and then have to like go back to being like, what's my place in this world? What if I'm not good at it?
But of course he's not shit.
No.
He's great, even though he has a massive potty mouth, which of course he does because he's Roy Kent. He's amazing. Sure. He just crushes it because of course he does. Because listen, if you want people to, if you want somebody to talk about football, you hire Roy Kent because he knows more than everyone else. Like,
Absolutely.
He's a superstar. And I think he loves it.
Yeah.
In the moment, like he like gets high from it.
I think so. Absolutely
he comes home, and of course Keeley knows exactly how it went, that he crushed it. But he walks in, and she doesn't want to wreck it by like
she wants to
pushing
play cool,
him,
right? Exactly.
And what does he do, Jennifer?
Oh, it's super hot. He puts in her earbuds, and he turns on the press conference and gives it to her, and then he goes down on her.
It's magnificent.
What a service.
It's a may we all have a Roy Kent in our life.
It was unreal. It was so good.
Terrific. I don't have any notes for episode 3.
There's only one really interesting thing about 3 when it's with Phoebe. Sassy's daughter is with Rebecca. And Rebecca's trying to do all this little girl stuff with her. And they run in, you know, she runs into Roy, right? And they're walking out. And he gives her this, like, you know, this piece of golden advice falls from his mouth, right? And he says, you know, they just want to feel like they're a part of our lives. And it's this really, like, interesting insight into, like, the way he is with Phoebe, you know, and there's a little more information about why he's with Phoebe so much. Basically, like, you know, his sister is a doctor, the dad is out of the picture, she just works a lot, and Roy can take care of Phoebe, and he loves to do it. So it's just like a really, I was also thinking, you know, it's so common in pop culture to have like aunts and uncles be terrible. Mm-hmm. And I also really like this idea that like instead, like he's great at it.
Just a cool uncle.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Roy-Phoebe relationship is really interesting across the board because throughout the whole season, you're sort of like, where's Phoebe's mom?
Yeah.
Like, what's happening with this kid?
So,
and
you know what's funny?
I feel weird about it in a lot of ways. Like, what's happening?
So, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go back to your Cheers observation because one of the things that was really interesting about Cheers is how like we never saw like Norm's wife. And we very rarely, if ever, saw, is it Carla? Her, like they only exist in the bar. I think that there's a way in which and like it's like at some point that it becomes almost like a joke. Wait, you're never going to meet Norm's wife?
Yeah,
you know? And so I think that in some ways it's like classic sitcom. Like they only exist in the workplace. And then,
yeah, but I mean,
right?
I guess that's true. But like Roy does exist in Phoebe's world.
Yes.
And every time you see him, he's doing some kind of serious parenting over in that world.
Right.
I mean, that's because, so episode 4 is the Christmas episode.
Yes.
And I'm going to give you an option. We can either do the Christmas episode now or we can do it later because it's out of time for this.
It is out of time.
The series.
You know what? I think we should just talk about it now and then move on.
First of all, sexy Christmas. Great. But let me just put a pin in this. Let me like put a capper on the Phoebe thing, which is, so the Roy and, so, okay, the Christmas episode is in fact out of time. They wrote 10 episodes. The season was intended to be a 10 episode arc. there are 2 extra episodes that were ordered by Apple and written after the fact. One is the Christmas episode, and I believe that the reason why the Christmas episode falls the way that it does, or is written out the way that it does, is that they could only get certain actors at certain times.
Maybe, yeah.
So that,
sense.
I mean, I'm making this up, but like that's how it feels to me. And so they knew they had to do they knew they couldn't do Roy and Keeley separate from each other for Christmas. So they had to like tighten it up and, film it whenever they could. So the Christmas episode has, I think, the most beautiful arc of it is the Higgins with all of the players arc. It's so fun. And it just, every time I've now watched the Christmas episode 3 times, and every time I watch it, I'm like, I just want Christmas with like 83 like 20-year-old boys like in my house. Like seems really darling. And then there's Rebecca and Ted delivering like Santa packages to kids who have written to Santa throughout London. And then there is Roy and Keeley's Sexy Christmas, where they're supposed to have Sexy Christmas, and it's like there's a great moment at 7 minutes in where he turns up and she is wearing a like
so hot,
absolutely like bangin like lady Christmas outfit. Oh, yeah. And he says, "Holy fucking shit, you look incredible." There's just one problem, which is Phoebe's mom is an ER doctor and had to go to work. So Phoebe's with them. So no Sexy Christmas. Instead, Sexy December 27th, which is today.
There you go.
Hey, I'm sorry I didn't dress for it. But during this time, Phoebe has halitosis. She has bad, really like, as Keeley describes it, medically bad.
Yes, right.
Breath.
Wait, before we go back, can I just tell you, I don't often wish for like scenes that aren't on screen. I'm not like that. I'm like, oh, look at the story they're giving me. But I really did spend some time imagining how Keeley would have convinced Roy to do something called Sexy Christmas anyway. I mean, I'm just trying to imagine her ramp up to that.
Yes. Agreed. I would like that too. Somebody fanfic that. So anyway, so Bernard, this jerk kid in her class, has given her a bottle of mouthwash as like a joke gift. And
so mean.
Roy says,
"Right, where does Bernard live?"
And Keeley's like, you can't beat up an 8-year-old.
I know.
And he's like, why? And then he decides that they are going to, in classic Roy Kemp fashion, he's like, there's a problem. I'm going to solve it. We are going to go back to my posh neighborhood.
Yes.
Knock on 10 doors and find a dentist. And if we get to the end of the 10 doors, you both get 1,000 pounds.
One of my favorite little throwaway lines is at one point Phoebe looks at Keeley and's like, 1,000 pounds. That's a month worth of swear words because she's been charging him, and it just shows you like how much money this kid is clearing in her like college bank account or whatever. Amazing.
And it's also like it ends with like a little nod. This episode, the whole season nods at rom-coms.
Yes. Yeah.
It nods at the end to the Love Actually scene with Keira Knightley and the husband's best friend.
With the card.
With the cards. But it's very darling. And it just shows like Roy Kent, if you are lucky enough to have Roy Kent love you, he is gonna, I mean, he's a full-on romance hero. He will do whatever it takes. He will knock on 10 posh doors on Christmas Day to make you happy. And like,
I know. You know, I will also say I watched this episode obviously back in July when it was on, and then I watched it again, and I understand, like, it's smart of them to have a Christmas episode, right? Because every Christmas I'll be like, I'm going to watch that episode.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's
and
so
it came out in July, and
me.
it was weird in July,
Yes.
but then like at Christmas, it was like,
Delightful.
This is the greatest. It's a gift.
Super smart.
Also, for those of you watching at home or keeping track at home about Sarah's theories of Rebecca and Ted, I'd like to just say about the Christmas episode that it is one of the moments where I think like Rebecca is also like a little bit Roy Kenty. I think Rebecca and Roy are being played off of each other a little bit in this whole season. Rebecca is like the Lady Roy because she talk about somebody who also like clearly cares deeply for Ted.
Yeah.
And like had this opportunity to go to Elton John's Christmas party, but also like maybe didn't have that opportunity and like just does this cool thing, you know, where she takes gifts to kids who don't have a ton of gifts on Christmas. And she goes to find Ted, you know, during the first Christmas after his divorce, which is a tough time. Again, grief, right? She understands where he's at. She's down in the hole with him. And I really love the two of them. And I love that she says to him, like, I'm not going to tell you where we're going, because she trusts that when they get there, he's going to just know what to say.
He'll know what to do. Exactly. Okay, before we leave the Christmas episode, can we talk about Isaac on the Christmas throne?
Oh, my God. What a gift.
Oh, I really love Isaac so much. But yeah, and then they're having like a secret Santa, and they're all exchanging just bottles of liquor.
Fabulous. And cash money for that sweet boy whose name I can't remember, but the Kit Man.
Yeah, right.
I mean, what a little darling he
but
is.
Like Isaac on the Christmas throne.
Eyes.
Amazing.
Oh my God. No, Isaac is also, I mean, Isaac this whole season.
I would, if there is a look, I love all the team.
I want spinoffs of everybody.
Yes. I love the team, but Isaac's arc on this was so good too.
Did you notice, speaking of Isaac, did you notice that he's reading A Wrinkle in Time at one point?
No.
Yeah.
That's how
pretty great. It's like, did Roy give Isaac a wrinkle in time? Episode 5, this is the rom-communism episode.
Which is almost like, when I watched it, some of these episodes felt like, I was like, is this for real? Like, it's being written right for us.
I know.
Right for
it's
romance
like
readers.
They know romance is out here, just like drinking it like mother's milk.
Yes. Right? Well, and I think that whole, you know, everything's going to end up, right? Everything's going to end up okay.
Yes.
But all the shout outs to all the different rom-coms. I mean,
adorable.
Oh, and this is also the scene where the one where Rebecca like makes herself big.
Listen.
And when Keeley's like, fuck you, let's invade France.
It is, when she did that, the first time she did that, I like spat out like I was like drinking and like spit taked. And it was the moment where I was like, oh, I would leave Eric for this person. Like, she is amazing. She is everything I've ever wanted in another human being. Like, I just want to be like her forever.
Yeah.
I make myself big. Oh my gosh. And like this episode, I don't know, it might be my favorite episode of the season because there are a couple things that happen. One, it is the episode that makes the promise. It makes a covenant promise to the viewer that I think is really interesting. At one point, Ted is in his office and he says,
now, these next few months might be tricky, but that's just because we're going through our dark forest. Fairy tales do not start, nor do they end in the dark forest. That son of a gun always shows up smack dab in the middle of a story. But it will all work out. Now, it may not work out how you think it will, or how you hope it does, but believe me, it will all work out. Exactly as it's supposed to.
And like, I had this moment that was like, oh my God, it's romance, right? Like, it's that that's it. Ted made us a promise in that moment. Yeah. Like, it is all going to be okay. It will work out. That moment, just like, oh, it's perfect. And then, of course, there's so much rom-com stuff.
Almost like too much to even like name.
Because Roy it's Roy and football again. Like it's they are the romance. And so they have had their dark moment. And now he's having his realization that what he really wants is to coach. And this is because this is the Isaac episode.
Ted, the way that he finally gets like Roy on the hook is to be like, something is wrong with Isaac. And that is Roy's responsibility because Roy is the one who said Isaac is your next, whatever it's called.
Captain.
And so this is
Well, he's also
right?
looking for a big dog, right? And this is where we lose Nate. It's the moment Ted loses Nate.
Yeah. But, this is also like back to the whole like workplace thing. I found myself thinking about Nate a lot, which is like a lot of my identity is built into who I am at work, but I cannot expect the people I work with to be my family. And this innate, like, right, like we do start to see like this, especially on the rewatch, right? Like this is where we really see that like by choosing Roy, he said goodbye to Nate. And it's really explicit when he chooses Jamie. He's worried he's going to lose the rest of the team. But this part, it's like the same exact thing, but like, right, a couple of episodes later. Like you chose one, you're going to lose the other. Because Nate cannot coexist peacefully with Roy as a coach. It's just never going to happen.
I struggle. I mean, you and I have talked about this separately. And obviously, again, we're not talking about Nate. We're talking about Roy this episode, but whatever. But I really struggle with Nate's arc.
Oh, yeah, me too.
As a writer and as like a human, because there's so much love for him from the jump. When we rewatched this second season, we rewatched from the start of season 1. And like, there's just like talk about a character who is constantly being lifted.
Right.
Right. And it's so hurtful. The idea that like, and like, whatever, this is Nate's journey and Nate is upset and Nate is going through it. And like, I don't mean to diminish that in any way, but like, it's that sense. I think the thing that hurts the most is that as a human who tries to lead with kindness, you sort of have this moment where you're like, oh my God, like there are some moments where like you just, you cannot do it right. Like you have done, like it feels like Ted did it right. And then like he makes that one moment, that one thing where he laughs at Nate about, you're not a big dog. You can't fix Isaac's.
Right. You don't have what it takes. But I think the thing that I found myself thinking about a lot as a corollary is, and I'm like skipping ahead to the end where Keeley realizes that she's gonna have to leave, stop working with Rebecca, and she goes to Higgins, and what Higgins says is, right, a good mentor wants you to move on, a great one knows you will. And so I was also thinking about like Nate reads, quote unquote, reads Ted's like behavior as disinterest. Whereas I think Ted mostly means it to be trust.
I think so too.
Right?
Especially because there's this sense of like, but also like, I mean, I think that, look, you also can't deny the father thread through this entire season. I mean, culminating in that amazing, we're going to talk about it, culminating in like a great dad moment.
Yes.
But this father piece, this like Ted as mentor, Ted as father figure, Ted as the supportive, like encouraging, like trusting leader that Nate doesn't have from his actual human father for lots of reasons. And so like when Ted says like, we're going to go with Nate's plan because Nate's plan is a good plan, Nate thinks Ted is trying to sabotage him. Like, which is, I mean, when has Ted ever sabotaged anybody except for himself?
And that's the part where you just really see, again, like my work competence and my personal vulnerabilities on a collision course.
Yeah, and just right. And also, it so feels. Brilliant. I mean, I think it's really interesting because there is a real sense of, and you know, we've been talking about this again. We're sort of on a Nate. This is the Nate pause of the podcast, but you know, Eric and I talked a lot about how Nate's hair is gray through the whole the whole season, which I think is a
little heavy-handed,
curious choice because it does feel a little heavy-handed. But Eric was like, I wonder if it started as like maybe Nate isn't as young as we thought he was. And I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. Like, I don't know. But I do think like in season 1, he feels very young.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And then like when the new Kit Man comes in, like this new Kit Man feels
You're like, oh, no, he's really young.
Extremely young, like a child. Like has acne, is a child.
Right.
And so like maybe Nate just isn't.
Maybe.
Like,
that's
but I
really
do have
interesting,
I did have a moment with Nate where I was like, he just feels green too in a lot of ways. Like your instinct, like he doesn't quite see the whole forest for the trees.
Season 3 is going to be
and is really bowled over by Rupert, which is gross.
Well, but of course he would be, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, Rupert knows how to manipulate people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so this episode, this rom-com episode, it's such a classic moment.
Yeah.
Like, Roy is mic'd up.
Yes.
Ready to go. And then he's like...
I miss all of it. Excuse me.
What are you doing?
I'm sorry, fellas. This isn't what I meant to do.
Roy!
Jeff, I have to go.
And it's like he runs to Nelson Road. It's like at the end of Notting Hill, where they're like getting to the press conference on time, right?
Yeah,
all of
and
that.
I can't get you any further.
Right. You know what else I really noticed? There were two really interesting things in that cab ride. One is that he gives the cab driver, he like thrusts this money at the cab driver, gives him cash and says, "You've got to date your wife," right? You have to you have to like take care of her and date your wife. But the other thing is,
which is a When Harry Met Sally nod.
And I don't know if we remember this, but in season 1 there was some throwaway line about how like one of Roy's girlfriend had like taken his watch.
Yeah, what? Like I need a phone and a watch,
right? But in this episode, he gives the watch away. He gives a watch away again. And it's like purposeful. Yes, like for
That's
love.
Interesting, for love.
And I remember thinking like the first time around, it was like you're a chump almost. Like you're too dumb to even like, like press charges against this woman who stole your watch. But this time around, he's like, I'm headed to Nelson Road. Take the fucking watch. I don't care.
He knows what's important.
Yes. And I really like that tiny little nod back to some of that stuff from season 1.
And then he's Reba. It's Reba McEntire. The ticket is there for Reba McEntire, and he's forced to say the words, which is a delight. And then he marches himself onto the field and changes everything. Yeah. Also, for writers in the group, knowing that this was originally episode 4, this is your Act 1 pivot.
Yeah.
Because we lose this episode, we lose Nate. Like suddenly Nate's been criticized.
Yep.
And we start to see Nate turn a corner to go down, and we start to see Roy really like come on a rise.
So good.
So episode 6. Oh no, and then there's of course
Just shut up. You had me at coach.
And then Beard gasps. And it's a laugh
really
out loud.
It really was great.
Very funny.
Famous Renee Zellweger line, right? Or no, I guess it's Tom Cruise.
You had me at hello. That's Renee.
Yeah. No, Tom says it.
Does he?
Oh, no.
Ask Mr. Romance. He went to prom with her. He'll know.
He did go to prom with her. You're right. She says it. He's talking, and she's like, shut up. You had me at hello.
Okay. Episode 6. Episode 6 is the panic attack episode. So while Jen is getting her thoughts together, I'll just tell you once again, Rebecca comes out, saves Ted.
Yeah.
She understands. Rebecca knows where Ted is at every step of the way this season.
Yeah, it's also really interesting because this is, we haven't talked about the doc yet. Mm-hmm. And, there's been a team therapist that was brought on to help Jamie, but like we see her helping so many of the characters as they're going through whatever it is that they're going through. And this is like one of the times where you really see like Ted needing help and not getting it.
Right.
But also it's really interesting that Roy is never involved in the therapy part at all. And I always get the sense that it's because like he's figuring this out for himself.
Yeah.
Like, right? It's really interesting.
Yeah. Roy also does not struggle to articulate his feelings.
His feeling.
It's his feeling, singular, yes. I mean, it's interesting because that's a good example of like where you might lose another sort of traditionally toxically masculine character is like an inability to acknowledge that he might have misread a situation, or he might have like been hurt, or like he might feel bad about something. Roy does not have trouble. He might have trouble like in the moment, like articulating the exact feeling, but he doesn't have trouble with the actual act of articulation.
Right. Yeah.
Like he might not know what the words are, but he knows like that he's feeling a feeling.
This is also the episode, though, where he won't coach Jamie. Like, we do see that, like, this is kind of the next crisis is going to build with Jamie. And so he will give advice or coaching to anybody else on the team, but he just won't have anything to do with Jamie. And so we know that this is something that, like, is going to have to be, like, worked out in order for Roy to really be, like, the coach. He has to stop ignoring this guy he just fucking hated.
Yes. This is also, there is some stuff happening here. And at 11 minutes, Ted says, it's time for you to woman up. You've been manning up for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, again, it's this moment where where there's an awareness of, like, in the writer's room, there's an awareness of, like these kind of, like...
gender norms, right?
Yeah, like, there's a moment of an awareness that in the writer's room, they're constantly playing with these gender norms.
Yes, I think so. And I think there's a lot of ways in which they're able to, you know, and I would say, who knows if these will age well, right? But like another one that struck me is like there's a part where it's in the last season where they're all like, it's halfway through the game before, if they don't make it, they don't get promoted. And he's like, it's a portrait of masculine melancholy or whatever.
I want that. Like, I want a giant, that should be a poster. Why is that not for sale, Apple?
I have no idea.
That should be for sale in Apple stores.
Seriously, what are you doing? So I think that there's like a part where it's like, you know, explicitly this is code for you're going to have to get over yourself. You're going to talk about your feelings. Yeah. You're going to have to like do this. We're not paying you to coach. I don't know, whatever he says, whatever fraction of the team. When Roy's like, fine, take it out of my check. You know, like, I'm not going to do it.
But then simultaneously, Ted is struggling with, like, keeping this secret, right? Ted has a panic attack. He leaves the field. And, like, no one can quite figure out what's going on except for Rebecca and ultimately Dr. Sharon.
That episode to me was just like setting up, you know, like, right, it's setting up like future conflict. But I think the other thing that's really interesting is we also haven't had a lot of Roy and Keeley for a while. And it's not until the next episode, if I'm ready to go on, that we get that like Keeley is super frustrated by essentially now like working with Roy, living with Roy, being with Roy, commuting with Roy, being with Roy, being with Roy, being with Roy, being with Roy.
And there's a moment, right, where as a viewer, you're like, you have this realization as a viewer who, you know, likes Roy a lot. But like having a Roy Kent figure be obsessed with you would be a lot. And then I really did have a moment where I was like, oh my God, it's full romance hero back, right? Because the truth is, and I've said this before on the podcast, we like these men in our books, but if we lived with them, it would be too much.
Yes, right? In the part where he like comes out to like read a book with her and she's like, I just want to, and it's like a Sex in the City scene where they're fighting, right?
Yeah.
And it's so, but I think the other thing that was really funny about this is there's several times he walks into conversations where everyone stops talking and he's like, are you talking about me?
The greatest moment of a character walking in on someone talking about him ever is Higgins and Rebecca jazz
What's going on? Why are you jazz scatting?
And of course, Roy, who's so like knows exactly what's going on, but cannot even observe the social nicety of pretending he didn't notice.
Yes.
He's like, are you talking about me?
Yes.
Okay. Like, not even bothered by it.
Well, and you know what? I had a moment, Jen, where I thought about you and the book that you chose for the box, the Fated Mates end of year box. The one that was like, what happens after the HEA?
You mean after the Billionaire's Wedding Vows by Lucy Monroe?
Yes. Because this is what happens, right? Like, so obviously that's a different situation where like the marriage goes really south. But like here it's like, this is what happens after the HEA. They're delighted. They have sexy Christmas. It goes a little south. Then there's like all the Roy drama. And now he's just around all the time. And don't you have somewhere to be, man? Keeley says,
Roy is none of those things. He's perfect. And I should know because I spend every minute of every second of every hour of every day with him, right?
Just tell him that you...
Hi, babe.
You talking about me?
Yes, definitely.
Ready to go?
Yeah.
Yes.
she says, he's perfect.
Yes.
Because he is perfect.
But just people need a little alone time, right?
Yes.
And the thing that was that I also thought was so brilliant about this, again, from like a writer's perspective, is they have this fight. He's furious. He storms out. I mean, she's like, "Oh my God, are we breaking up?" Like that's how serious it is. And the next day, he's on the field and he's coaching, and he realizes essentially like how much of an ass he's been when he gives them directions on the field that like make no sense. And it was Jamie who's like, "I have to trust my teammate to like use the space that I'm giving."
What'd you say?
The best thing I can do in that situation is give him space.
He's right, actually.
Yeah, I know. I learned it from Pep.
You got it from Cruyff.
Pronounced Cruyff.
Oh, okay, Englishman.
Look, whatever. The point is that Richard doesn't need me to crowd him. And since he's my teammate, I should trust him to do what's best. Right?
And then he goes, fuck! Because Jamie, especially because it takes Jamie
Yes.
explaining it, that for Roy to understand. I mean, I was going to save this for later when we do the dad episode, but we really slept on Phil Dunster last year.
Oh yeah, completely.
Because the actor who plays Jamie is just
So
tremendous. And I literally now, I want to see everything he's ever been in.
Yeah, he's amazing. Well, and then he puts her in a bath full of rose petals.
And has a special playlist full of Sade.
Listen.
The Roy is sorry for not understanding Keeley playlist, which of course you can get on Apple Music. And probably somebody wonderful has made it on Spotify too.
Yes.
So they have sexy bath time. And he talks about her gross feet. And it feels like after the HEA.
Yes.
Again, like there's hair in the drain and they're like her feet are gnarly and it's okay. Can I just pause on this episode though? There's also a moment, there's an echo of dialogue in this moment that I think is also really relevant to the whole series and to us as readers and people in general. But Beard checks Nate in this.
Yes.
In this episode. I forget why. Do you remember why?
Well, he's really shitty to Colin. Like Colin comes in and is
he's
kind of
really
like
mean to Colin.
so mean, right? And
Colin,
Yes.
who is like visiting Dr. Sharon, has a new mantra. Like is poor Colin.
I hope he finds the man of his dreams in
He
season 3.
Will, I hope.
Okay.
But Beard checks Nate. And it was an echo of something Phoebe said to Bernard on the cards during the Christmas episode. And it was, do better.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Like, I love that because it's that sort of be curious, not judgmental. It's not like, hey, you suck. It's just like, I think you can do better.
Yeah.
Like, we can all just if we could all just lead a little bit with do better.
And it's not, the goal then is not perfection. It's just improvement.
Right. Yeah. And it was really, and I heard it on the watch.
Yeah.
All right, episode 8. This is your haircut.
God, I don't know why it was so amazing.
It's amazing every time. So Sam, you have to talk about Sam and Rebecca just to set it up.
So Sam and Rebecca have unknowingly been flirting each other through the Bantr app. And they finally agreed to meet. And they don't know that it's each other. And so Sam, they're in the locker room, turns to Isaac and says, will you give me a haircut? And the whole room, freezes because it's something, important has happened. And who's the Dutch guy? Jan is like, what's going on? Why is this a big deal?
The Dutch guy is one of my favorite characters, too.
You know who he reminds me of? He's like in the Golden Girls. Sophia, the one who just says anything.
Yeah. Except Sophia has an edge of like, she's going to be mean to you. This guy just like says it.
I'm just saying.
Like he has no way of reading a room. And I love that Sam at one point says like, oh, he's not mean. He's just Dutch.
He's just Dutch.
With love to our Dutch listeners. We love you.
And so someone explains to him that like basically you can get one haircut a season from Isaac and that he is in fact like a master with the clippers. Right?
And when he asks for it, the whole room is like,
oh yeah, fall silent. Oh, it felt a lot like the cultural competence of like, here's the barbershop in the locker room. And that there's like this way that we see people taking care of each other in the show that happens in lots of different ways. And like, I don't know, I just loved like, and he's such an artist with the clippers. It's not, I mean, like the way he approaches you and, you know.
And I love that Jamie is the one again who like shuts everyone, like he's like, shut up, everyone.
Shut up. The magic is happening.
This is a precious event that has only happened a finite number of times.
And can only happen a finite number of times.
Jamie, who was such an asshole last season and didn't care about the team at all, like it's a moment where we see Jamie in the team.
And that's going to be important for later.
It's magnificent. And it's Sam also saying like, I choose like, I'm going to go with my gut. It's where we start to see Sam making choices that are about what Sam
journey
thinks are important.
Yeah.
Which again will become important over the course of the rest of the season. So, and of course, that sort of glorious kinship from all of them.
Well, it's also really interesting because you see that like the team has their
rituals.
Yes. And then the coaches and the Diamond Dogs have theirs. And they don't necessarily interact all the time, but I think it's like this nod to like there's like a magic that's happening in the team itself.
Yeah.
And this is like a moment where we really see that. And I just think it's amazing.
It's
perfect. You watch Fleabag, right?
Yes.
It also reminded me a lot in Fleabag where like they go to get, her sister goes to get a crazy haircut, or maybe she does. And the guy is like, a haircut can fix this. There's something magical about this haircut.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it's given by Isaac. It's like given with love. It's not to fix anything.
Also Isaac's moment as captain. Like you go to Isaac for guidance. You go to Isaac.
Yes.
Isaac
to
knows
be your best
what
self.
you need.
Yes.
I mean, it's a wrinkle in time, right?
Yeah.
Isaac is the leader now. Oh, yeah. I love it. I hope Isaac is like a major figure in season 3.
Me too. Can I just say one other thing? The other thing we saw with Roy in this episode was he picks up Phoebe, who's been in trouble for swearing at school.
Oh, this is the teacher episode?
Yes. No. There's a couple teacher episodes.
This is the first teacher episode.
Right. Where he says, I'm really worried I've been infecting you with the worst parts of me. And she's like, Uncle Roy, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yep.
It's really tender.
I like, as somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about curse words and their value and the way that we both value them and the way that we imbue them with certain kinds of value, and the fact that, again, I've talked about this book and this person many, many times on the podcast, but Mona Eltaways, The 7 Necessary Sins of Women and Girls, has this whole like really impassioned argument that the reason why we police curse words is because of patriarchy. Like we police girls' language and women's language in a different way than we do men's language, and we police, language in general, like class-wise. And I don't know if this is something that they were thinking about, but this is one of those moments where when you're doing like a podcast about an episode of something, you can just say it. And sure. I'm just saying, like, I really like that the cursing keeps coming back in interesting ways. Yes. And I like the Phoebe, I like that we see this conversation happening, this push-pull.
Yeah, right. Well, and he doesn't just say, I'm a grown-up. He says, I'm a footballer.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to talk like that because it's part of my
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
You're a kid in school and you're
You
not.
can't. Yeah. So I told you my daughter got Doc Martens
Yes.
for Christmas, and she was putting them on, and she was like, they're so heavy.
Yeah.
And without really thinking, I said, oh, well, that's why they're called shit kickers. And she looked at me, and I was like, okay. And she was like, why? And then I was like, well, because you can kick shit with them. Like, you can really, you can bust things down with them. They're boots for doing important work.
Yeah.
And then I was like, and then she walked into the kitchen, and she was like, I got shit kickers. And I was like, okay, so you can say that with us, but please do not say that at school with your friends.
Right.
Right. Yeah. But also I was like, but it's for, they're for,
Yeah.
they're for raging against the machine.
Literally.
I mean, that's why I got my first pair.
And I think it's,
Anyway.
So we have to talk, though, about what happens at the end of this episode, right?
Oh, my God. This is the dad's episode, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's the first dad's episode because then we get Rebecca and her, this is, again, Rebecca is like a member of the team. She's having all the same problems everybody else is having.
Right.
But in her own way.
So Jamie's dad, they're playing it in Wembley Stadium. They get their asses handed to them. It is a humiliation.
It's awful.
In a way that I was almost like, wow, they don't usually show this kind of thing on TV, right? Like, it's so painful to watch. And there's also not a whole lot of football, really, in the season. So when it is on screen, to have it be like this, it's terrible.
Yes.
And Jamie's dad, who's real shit, and we know that is there. And this is like and he comes into the locker room, and he is just a maggot. I mean, I don't know how,
he's awful. He's awful. He's almost a caricature.
Yeah.
It's so uncomfortable.
Yes.
I mean, talk about taking the finger. They don't pull any punch with this character.
And I think one of the things that's really fascinating to me is he is not a big man physically. He is in a room full of these men who are literally in their prime. He's not very big, he's small, and yet his meanness, talk about making yourself big, right? Like, it's the corollary of what Rebecca does, because he has made himself big in this room, and he is being terrible to Jamie, just humiliating him, making fun of their performance, saying how terrible they were. It is painful to watch, and Jamie punches him in the face, right? Yep. And Beard drags him out of the room while almost everyone else is just frozen. And there's like one of those things where, like, I think we've all experienced this. When you see something like unexpected and truly shitty go down, it is so hard to like know what to do in that moment. You just are frozen.
And
all of them
moves.
It's it's really
Oh, and then
that's
that hug. I mean, this is again Phil Dunster. He is so great.
Yeah, and so he punches his dad out, and then he's just like vibrating, right? Like, it's just like it's like there's nowhere for that to go. And they're all just sort of staring at him. It's this awful moment. And then all of a sudden, Roy just like, I don't even know, like, he propels himself across the room, right? And he hugs him. And you see Jamie just like, at first he's just like being hugged, right? And then he hugs Roy back, and it is there. It's like if you were like, show me how the patriarchy hurts men in one TV minute, this would be it.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think I said that we learned about Ted's father in an earlier episode, but there are like hints about Ted's father in the panic attack episode. Mm-hmm. But this is the episode where he fully he like confesses. I mean, it's not a confession, but he like tells Sharon, he calls Dr. Sharon, and he says that his father killed himself.
And that, to me, I will also say is like a moment that really, like, I feel like I can like play it in my head, right? Where he's like, that happened to me and it happened to my mom. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's it was so emotionally devastating. And I feel like there's also this way in which, like, Roy hugging Jamie, I don't think it's not that it couldn't have been anyone else, but, like, I don't know that it would have been anyone else, maybe, is the way to say it.
Yeah. No, I don't think, I think if it had been anyone else, it wouldn't have had the weight of it.
Right.
Episode 9 doesn't exist. Episode 10 is the funeral.
Yeah. Yeah.
The manifestation of all this grief and, like, the weirdness around grief. And what's cool is every character has a weird response to this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
First, Isaac tells them all that they have to wear dress shoes. I love it. Again, Isaac is leader. Isaac is going to...
No trainers, right? And they're all like, I don't have time to stand in line to get these other shoes. And Jamie's like, you don't have to stand in line for these shoes. Nobody wants them. So good. So good, Sarah.
So, Rebecca's father dies.
Yeah.
God, I love this episode. You know me. I love anything that's about a woman's father dying.
Yeah. Well, it's now like grief made manifest, right? Like the thing that we have been dancing around all season is now like right there on page, literally.
And so there's a lot of discussion. Everybody's sort of coming to terms with how they feel. Like, again, everyone's feeling a feeling.
Yeah.
Also feeling like they're reliving things. Ted is reliving his father's death, which we discover in this episode was horrible.
Yeah.
And then there's the moment where Keeley's like, for the Roy and Keeley piece, there again, now we're in the after the HEA, right? We're in the part where they really do feel kind of married.
Yes.
There is a moment where she says that she would like to be buried under an apple tree and then have the fruit, like the tree bear fruit, and she wants people to be nourished from her corpse. And he says,
That is fucking mental.
yeah, like, right? And here's the truth, is that felt like possibly the most like my own marriage as these two have ever been, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have an 8-year-old. There is no sexy Christmas here in Brooklyn. But, like, I can absolutely imagine saying something like that and Eric looking at me like, that's insane. And you have now gone off the edge.
I think in my marriage, I'm the Roy Kent. Like, when he was like, you live, you die, you're done. I was like, yep. Sounds, move along. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So I just love, and then she's upset because he's not understanding. Like, he doesn't understand what she's really talking about here. Like, she's trying to go through her own, she's working through her own stuff, and he's being insensitive. Like, then he comes back with the apple. Yeah. He's like, I got this from a tree outside. Like, you know, and there's a moment of like, he's not getting it and he's not being sensitive to her. And so later, at the like the buffet after the ceremony, Jamie confesses. Oh, Jamie, who's also like dealing with funeral shit. Everybody in this whole episode is going through some funeral shit.
Yes.
Jamie tells Keeley that he loves her.
Yeah.
I know that you're with Roy and that you're happy, but today's made me realise that I'd hate myself if I didn't say I didn't just come back to Richmond to get away from my dad. I also came back because of you. I finally think that I'm becoming the best version of myself, the kind of man that you always knew that I could be. And I know that this is a mad, shitty thing to do, but I love you, Keeley. Sorry.
And it's an interesting moment because I really, like, as a watcher, was kind of scared. Like, I was like, wait, is she going to get back with this Yahoo?
I thought so, too. Although, now I'm not sure he's a Yahoo. So
no, but I think for me what that was, though, is, like, the appeal right then of someone who is going to, like, validate the feeling she is having as opposed to Roy, who is like not.
So, yeah, I agree. And I think it was really interesting because it went from, so Jamie confesses that he loves her. And you can sort of, I mean, again, Juno Temple is just magnificent. Her eyes are humongous.
So good, yes.
And she just, suddenly you're like, you can see her just internalizing this confession. And then Roy, like, immediately turns up after and is like, I'm sorry, I've been an asshole. And you can see, like, he is also just, again, it's like these two fairly, now that we're seeing, like, everyone's nuanced, everyone has their tough times, everybody has, and, like, there's no flat character in Ted Lasso. Jamie's proof, right? Like,
right.
In season 1, he was a delight because he was such a flat character for so long.
Not anymore, yeah. One of the reasons that Jamie approaching Keeley feels like such a betrayal to me, I think to everyone, is that this is immediately after the episode, essentially, where Roy hugs him in the locker room.
Yes.
Right?
And I think probably would feel more like that if episode 9 didn't exist. Right?
Yes, right? Like, so it's easy to sort of forget because there's that. But I remember I skipped episode 9. And so I just went straight from the hug to this. And it's, you're like, okay. And I think it's clear, like, everyone is just dealing with their own shit. But I will tell you, it's so shitty too, right? You're like, God, why did you do that? Like, Roy was just
kind to you, so kind to you.
Yeah.
Do better, Jamie.
Do better. He's still a baby doing better. Yeah.
He is. He's another, like, literal baby.
Can you talk about this? Wait, can you talk about this as a writer? Because you talked about, like, sort of the 3-act structure kind of driving this season. So at what point do you think we're, like, making the turn into these final episodes?
So I think one of the big failings, this is now going to be me talking about the 3-act structure for a second, so just forward for like a minute if you don't care. My thing about the 3-act structure is I think that we often look at it and we talk about it as like 3 equal acts.
Right.
I don't think of it at all as 3 equal acts. I think it's Act 1 and then Act 2 are often about the same length. Mm-hmm. And then Act 3 is really the climax. So the pacing is different. It's really just a much tighter, shorter act.
Yes, I agree.
I actually think that the end of the funeral where Jamie makes his confession, we see Rupert
the baby.
with, like, the baby. We see
Rebecca breaks up with Sam.
We see Rupert talk to Nate. Suddenly it's like there are lots of things that, like, a lot of like ribbons are being tightened. Everything's getting a little tighter. And so for me, episode 10 is the end of Act 2. And then you have 2 more episodes, right? So you see, this is where, and for Roy and Keeley, this is the photo shoot episode, which is really the climax. It's a climactic moment for their relationship. This is the test, right?
Yes.
And what's interesting is I said, I've been saying this whole recording, like, oh, this is what happens after the HEA. It's actually, if you look at season 2, like season 2's arc with Roy and Keeley is like a marriage. Like, this is HEA, and now here's your low moment of the season of the book.
Yes.
If you look at it as a romance novel, the low moment is this moment where we see that Keeley and Roy are possibly going in different directions.
Yeah.
So Keeley's got this photo shoot. She's been asked to be is it Vanity Fair or Vogue?
Or Vogue or something, right?
Yeah. So Keeley's been asked to be in Vogue. She's on this list of, like, the most powerful women in powerfulness. And she looks fucking great. I mean, she's just hot. And they've asked for Roy to be at the photo shoot.
Right.
For a couple of photographs. They want the hot footballer boyfriend. And this is my favorite moment of this episode is when he describes his all black outfit as dark heather and charcoal, not all black, which is perfect.
Amazing.
But this is also the episode where Nate kisses Keeley.
Yeah.
which is a major moment in Nate's. Like, this is where, this is again, like, if you're thinking about it as like, this is the climactic episode of the season. This is also, I think, is it the episode where Rebecca confesses to Ted?
I think so. Well, and it's also the scene the one where Roy spends like hours in the classroom with Phoebe's teacher. And then when she says, "Are you married?" he just says no.
Yeah. And they have that. And then Roy and Keeley have that great moment on the couch during the photo shoot. So I want to get there. Wait, but there are other things before we do that. Can we talk about Bye Bye Bye?
Yes.
The like full on dance number that Ted is coaching the team through to say goodbye to Dr. Sharon, who is leaving again, a kind of like important moment for the whole arc of the season. Yeah, amazing. You have to look like puppets. That's why you have to look like marionettes. That's why it's called No Strings Attached.
Amazing, honestly. So great.
Yeah, so Roy doesn't tell the teacher about Keeley. You want to talk about that? I mean, you want to talk about that teacher scene? I know that you have a...
Oh, yeah. I just think I'm going to tell you right now. It's like real weird, very weird to have Phoebe drawing pictures of tits. I was just like, what was this? I just have, you know what? There are two things I have excised from my memory when it comes to this season. And one is the beard episode.
Episode 9.
Episode 9 and that 9 seconds. Like, it's just like weird. And then Roy's like, checking. It was,
This teacher's really interesting to me because I actually really like her.
Of course.
And I've liked her for both seasons.
Yeah.
And like, there is a kind of, again, it's a moment where you think like, sometimes like your life just takes a different path.
Yes,
right? Like
absolutely.
You could totally see Roy and this teacher working out.
In a different time, right. Well, and that's the thing I think about, when we talk about the HEA, I mean, look, you and I love fated mates, but for like, real life.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. It just means you decided. You decided. And one of the things that I think is really nice about this episode is it's showing both of them deciding. And that's scary because I remember at the end of this episode being like, if this show breaks my fucking heart and they do not end together, I am going to be so upset because it just would feel like such a betrayal of like the promise back in the rom-com, right? It's all going to work out. And I think that
but it won't work out the way you thought.
Right.
It might not work out the way you think it will.
And there's a part that was really interesting when they're sitting on the couch where they're essentially like confessing to each other. And at first it feels open, but then it feels like weaponized, right? Like at first
Nate
it's like
kissed me.
Yes. And it was really interesting the way we perceive like threats to the health and safety of our relationships versus the ones like we make ourselves, right? I just think this show's so smart.
Well, yeah, and that scene on the couch comes after 34 minutes into this episode where Roy walks into the bedroom and Keeley is like,
oh yeah,
gorgeous, like totally put together, but she is unhinging. Like,
yes.
right? She is like panicking about maybe she's not good enough, maybe she's not strong enough, maybe she shouldn't have been chosen for this. Like she's having a real moment of self-doubt, which is so normal.
Right.
Right? And at 34 minutes, Roy says, the real you is fucking amazing. You are Keeley fucking Jones, independent woman. Right? And I think, and there's this moment where it's like, you can see her just settle. Like,
yes.
Okay, Roy is here. Roy is my rock. Roy matters. What Roy thinks of me is like important. Like what Roy says to me is important to me. Like I internalize
he's my partner.
it. Like I trust him. He's with me. Like he is with me. And then on the couch, it's...
This to me is also like the inverse then of the scene on the couch with them earlier in episode 2. Where she was the one who was like, you can do this. You've got this. Just go do it. And then like the couch figures, right? Like in like them being vulnerable and open. And here they are. Now they're vulnerable and open again, but in a painful way, right?
Yep.
So it's really like that knife cuts both ways. Being vulnerable and open means being vulnerable and open.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they had to be on the couch at the end. I think that had to be where that conversation happened.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, if you want to play that couch theme all the way through, there's also the moment earlier in the season where Jason Sudeikis lies down. I say
Yes.
Jason Sudeikis because he lies down on that couch in the therapist's office, and he is like, he does like a full on like comedy routine of like, where do I put my things? Like, how do I feel? Like it's so long that it starts to feel like not like Ted Lasso, but like, you're watching an SNL sketch. But again, it's that sort of like, this is where you are supposed to be honest.
Yeah.
And then Sharon says, well, why don't you just sit? Because you're supposed to be honest everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and even back in season 1, when Roy was like, I'm not going to be able to do this. And she calls Phoebe over and is like, what do you like about your Uncle Roy? Like they were sitting on a couch.
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like I really think about this as like the
couch in Rebecca's office is like
where
they're always having their moments.
It's like an important part of our modern lives, the couch.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then it just becomes, it's really fascinating because it feels like there's this moment where, and it also is so important, right? Because it's Nate. Again, we see it ties in. The writing is so smart. Everything ties into everything else. When Keeley says, Nate kissed me, Roy's like, okay, well, that must have been awkward for you, right? Which, of course, is about to become it's about to seed the animosity with Nate.
Even further.
Because, again,
it's like the final straw.
You're not like a real threat. You're not you don't have any
Jamie
real
is.
weight. You're not a heavyweight.
Yeah. And that's it is like that moment is really painful and you find yourself thinking like, what's going to happen? And it's interesting to me that like they make it through like by the next episode. It's, there's not like fallout from that moment really at least
not for that. That's not the moment that is the painful moment for them.
Yeah.
So episode 12, Roy's pissed at Jamie again.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. He calls the Diamond Dogs to order.
He does.
Well, and listen, I'm sorry, I've been joking about the whole time. When he says...
They didn't use a single picture with me in it. And it hurt my feeling.
But then he says, she looked so great on her own without me.
Yeah.
And it's so good.
It's so good. You know what it reminded me of is in Marrying Winterbourne, there's this part where this older woman who is essentially like their chaperone says to Reese Winterbourne, like essentially like, do you think you deserve Helen? Like, are you even like good enough for her? And what he says is, this woman says, don't you think, she's marrying down by being with you, right? And what he says is, every man marries above himself. Lady Helen is so far above all men that none of us deserve her. Therefore, it might as well be me. And what I liked about this, like what felt like real romance hero-y to me in this moment, was us seeing Roy, who has been, I'm the footballer. I'm the one who's amazing in this up, right? Feeling like maybe I don't deserve her. Maybe she's too good for me.
That scene in Keeley's kitchen.
Yes.
When he comes in and she's so nervous. And I got to say this. A lot of women in relationships with men who have like high-powered careers or like who have accolades come to them that are beyond like world's greatest mom, right? Have a moment when they are proud of themselves, like in their career, and they have. I can definitely think of times when you sort of think to yourself, like, is it okay? Like, is it going to be okay? Is it going to be okay for me to say this to him? Is he going to feel like I'm getting
this is
something
making me less?
Yeah. Does this somehow make me too big For you talk all the time about like making yourself like we try so hard to make ourselves small, right? And Rebecca was like, I make myself big before I walk into a room with all these men. Like Keeley tells him that she got this opportunity and like the Bantr people want to like fund her PR firm, and he is so proud of her.
I know.
And he says like, holy fucking shit.
Shit, that is huge. What? You are a fucking CEO and shit. That's amazing.
I know. Love you so much.
Look at you. The boss. Not gonna have time for me anymore.
And it's like a little bit of a joke, but like there's a kernel of truth in it, but he's still so proud of her. And he's like, let's open the champagne we've been saving.
And she says it was going to be for a special occasion. And he was like, this is it, right?
Yeah. And she gets the pictures.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my God, you're not in them. I'm going to call them. I'm going to
fix
tell
this.
them. And he's like, don't you change a fucking thing.
Yeah.
You look powerful and fucking gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it is so great because he is like, she is so far above me that no one will ever deserve her. But like, I get to be here with her. Yeah. It's like, it's a little of both. It's bittersweet, right? He's not here, there, everywhere, Roy Kent. But he can like be present as Keeley becomes Keeley Jones.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
It's so beautiful. It is like a model for how all men should be in marriages. Like, it's so good.
And then I think, the thing is at the end, like he says, like, we're going to go away for 6 weeks. And it's like this really hard moment where you realize like it's for him. I'm going to go and eat tapas and not worry about my knee. And it's also for her, but it's what he wants. And I think he's wonderful, but I think she's like, I can't do it. I can't go away. Right.
And then he says, are we breaking up? Because he can't figure it out. Like it's complicated, right? Like,
yes,
this is a relationship between two people who are deeply skilled in their own lives and their own careers, who are independent people.
Right.
And trying to figure out how to be with each other. And she says, no, of course not.
Of course not.
And then there's like, and I'll see you in 6 weeks. And then we'll be fine.
Yeah.
And like, I gotta say,
see them again. It's really interesting, even though we see 3 weeks later and 2 months later, we just are left to assume that they are fine.
I know, and I am concerned.
Are you?
I'm concerned. I'm concerned because television has not necessarily proven itself trustworthy in this particular arena.
Yeah. Yeah. No, of course I'm concerned too.
I'm concerned. So I'm looking forward to season 3 from that perspective. I would like to shout out another very favorite line from the whole episode, which is that at the beginning of this episode, he shouts,
"Whistle! Oi! I said whistle!"
on the screen, on the thing. And the reason why is because whistles give him, mouth sores. He says earlier in the whistles, I'm sorry, earlier in episode 7, he says whistles give him mouth hives. Because everybody's like, why don't you use a whistle? And he's like, whistles give me mouth hives. So he shouts whistle, whistle, which I think is great. And then also at 27 minutes, he says,
Wait, so sometimes the fucking Diamond Dogs is just chatting about shit and no one has to fucking solve anything and nothing fucking changes?
Sometimes, yeah.
That's cool.
You know what else I loved about this episode is, or maybe it's like actually the end of the episode, the previous one, there's a point where like you just see his jaw twitching.
mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's some real romance hero shit right there. Right? Literally.
And then the headbutt and then the hug between him and Jamie, which is so bro-y and like, dude. I mean, they've really they walked the tightrope of like, make these characters like super like dude characters, but give them like humanity and
It's amazing.
let them be nuanced. Let them have feeling.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is.
And so our Richmond Greyhounds have been promoted.
They have. I literally forgot. I was like, wait, did they win?
And then at the
That's how not important that was to me.
Very end, Ted Lasso makes us another promise, which is we're just going to have to come back and win the whole fucking thing.
Sure.
And that is the plan for next season, hopefully.
What a show.
And then we find out that Rupert is still an asshole and Nate is now gray-haired over there.
Right. Running some sort of crazy type ship of practice.
Yeah. Please remember, Nate has still been a coach for like 3 seconds. So hopefully he is hoisted on his own petard.
We see a lot of hints that he does not trust himself. He actually does have everything it takes to be a great coach, but he doesn't trust himself.
Because he's young, because he's green.
And I don't think he trusts the players, right? I mean, that's like really clear in the last episode. He's like, they're going to fuck it up. You know they will. And then you're going to blame it on me.
And that's why you're calling it my play.
And that part's really hard. That's going to be hard, I think, to watch.
Yes.
I don't know, 800 hours later, there we did it.
All in all, here's where I'm at. I loved this season. I loved that it was very much what happens like after the HEA. I love that they had to work through some things. I love that Roy had to grow. I love that Keeley was still able to grow, like in a relationship with him in a way that she wasn't. She was stunted by the relationship with Jamie, but like Roy gives her this like opportunity to be the best version of herself. And him too, same. And like they're just a perfect couple. And please don't fuck it up, you guys.
Seriously.
Let them be good for each other. Let them be a model for like how we should all be with each other in relationships. I have a question for you, which is right at the very first episode where we see them talking about Bantr. I don't know if it was episode 1 or when it was, but like that episode, there is a quick moment where we are led to believe that Rebecca and Ted are texting.
Oh yeah, right.
Bantr. So my question is, who is Ted texting? And I don't know. If you have theories out there, I welcome them.
You know what else I will say I like about this show is like how, I mean, I like in general want, like I'm a romance reader. I want people to find romance, but I love the friendships in this. I love the friendships in the show. I love Keeley and Rebecca. I love Rebecca and Leslie. I love Ted and Beard. I love all of these friendships that are so like genuine. The Diamond Dogs. I just think that it's just so beautiful.
Can we just talk about just Keeley and Rebecca for 1 second? Episode 10, that's the funeral episode. Rupert shows up with new Rebecca and their baby. And at 13 minutes, 20 seconds, Keeley says, I hate that baby. I hate that baby. And it's magnificent. And Rebecca is standing there in her full black morning outfit. And then she just says, I love you. And like, it's so
it really
perfect. Is. And I love it. And like, you should all have friends like Keeley
and sassy.
Rebecca. And sassy. Who gives it to Rupert? Right? I will wear red to your funeral. I can't. She's great.
Bitch was amazing. Yeah,
she's great. Listen, that Sassy and Keeley are perfect. Like, make new friends and keep the old.
Exactly.
Right. One is silver and the other is gold. They are perfect.
It's great.
If I could just claim one Sassy and one Keeley in my life. That's right. Listen, I love this show. I love it more every season.
Every time I watch, it's so rewarding.
Except for that one episode.
Happy New Year, everybody. It's 2022.
I know. We hope that you love it. Tell us your theories about Ted Lasso. Tell me if I'm right that I think it's going to be Ted and Rebecca in the end. I actually.
Oh yeah.
Here's the thing. I don't know
if with your theory. Right?
listen, well, I don't have to end with my theory, but like I really thought that funeral episode, one of the reasons why I love that episode so much is because of the way that they interconnect. Rebecca coming home to discover her father having an affair and Ted coming home to discover that his father has killed himself, and how these two fathers' actions have shaped them both in different ways. Obviously, one is much worse than the other, but like Rebecca's like so many of Rebecca's like insecurities and, you know, self-consciousness and the choices that she made as a person and as a woman and as a wife and now like as a daughter, like all the things that have made her who she is, like happen in that moment, that one moment. And same with Ted, right? Everything spills out from that moment.
Ted knows that Nate is the one who, you know, sold him out to Trent Crimm, and he's like, look, we've got a job to do. Right? This is now not the time for my personal shit. I'm going to go out there and coach that game and win that game. And that is, I think, the other part that's, again, like that differential between like, I can, you know, be a professional, but this is not the time for my personal shit. And like when he has this panic attack, it's a panic attack. He can't control it. But I'm fascinated too by the way that all played out. I mean, this show's so brilliant. There's so much.
Well, maybe it is good that we're ending with this because I do also think like part of this is about fated mates, right? Like it feels like in that moment, in that back and forth, I wrote it down. Like it's Rebecca and Ted were fated, not necessarily as lovers, but like they're fated to be together. Yeah. Like they're two halves of their story is the same. You know, like all of these characters, many of these characters feel fated for each other in some way.
Yeah, once they can be open and vulnerable.
Happy New Year, Jen.
Happy New Year, Sarah.
I hope it's better. It's going to be better. It's going to be okay. Don't tell everyone what you said to me earlier this week. Staying quiet. No, it is. It's going to be better this year. It's going to be great.
We'll be back with Trailblazers. Our next read-along is Passion by Lisa Valdez. Woo!
Yeah. I mean, start as you mean to go on is what I'm saying about that for 2022. Content warnings, maybe? Probably. Let's be honest, probably. Check Goodreads if that's a concern. Definitely if you have cervix issues, you know, heads up on that. And, all right. You can find us at fatedmates.net or on Twitter at fatedmates or on Instagram at fatedmatespod. We are produced by Eric Mortensen. And this year we've got some really fun stuff planned. And we hope you're reading a fabulous romance novel to start the new year right.